We'll now kick off the Health and Environmental Protection Committee meeting for March 27th, 2025. First order is the, we have, which one do we go with, the online or the minutes or the?
So it's in your hand.
Okay, so we'll start with the discussion regarding the recreation tax, or the unincorporated recreation tax.
Yes, so good to see everybody, and thanks for everybody for coming to Fort Mill tonight. It's good to have a change of location. So yes, I know that's convenient for some of y'all and not for others, and now we understand what it's like for Debbie to make the drive. Tonight we wanted to follow up on the questions and the conversations we had last committee meeting. In the in-between, Tom and I and Joe, we went and met with our municipal parks directors and had a conversation with them, which was one of the things that y'all, I think, had requested. We also received this week the packet of data in front of y'all, which is information from each of the municipalities about their numbers. And so we wanted to provide that. We'll speak a little bit about that tonight. But most importantly, we wanted to jump in and talk about potential options in front of us and break down some options for y'all. So that's what we heard from the last meeting as well. I think the big thing that I've shared with y'all in the past and in our council retreat that we recently had, we have a lot of parks that are coming online. We are opening Catawba Bend next year. There's conversations in this next item on the order of business about Bethel Lake Wiley and its relation to the Parks Master Plan, what we can do with current funding versus what we're going to have to invest in to build some of those parks. Y'all added $1.2 million in this FY25 budget to help fund current park operations. So when you add all those things together, we need to be able to take care of our parks, and that's one of the fundamental philosophical challenges we have. We enjoy participating and collaborating with the municipalities, but we have to be able to run our own parks too. And so that's really the problem before us tonight. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to our Assistant County Manager over Development Services, Tom Couch.
Thank you, Mr. County Manager. Obviously, it's great to be a Michigan Wolverine and hold that tiger, right? Thank you for being with us tonight. I've been asked to do some analysis about recreation funding, and York County, I would argue, and when I say argue, I mean that respectfully and critically, not argue against it, but it's York County provides a non-traditional model for parks. I come from a background that comes from a more traditional parks and recreation management model, probably a little closer to what Rock Hill has. Admittedly, some of the other cities too, but Rock Hill has several of what I would call retail facilities, like the Velodrome, and that soccer complex is really impressive. It's stuff that's been built and accumulated over the years, and they're really great facilities to have. But they're a little bit non-traditional because not everybody has them, like York and Fort Mill and TVK and so forth. There may be a little variations here and there. But when I look at what York County has as a service model, and forgive me, I'll try to step back as far as I can so you can see. But aside from Field Day Park, which is actually in a special tax district, the county manages over 4,000 acres, and the activities are very outdoorsy and rugged, if you will. Up in the Midwest, we would typically call the types and the variety of parks that that York has, whether it's Catawba Bend, Ebenezer, Nanny's Mountain, Worth Mountain, so forth, sort of a emerging Metro Park system or a Metro Park style of service model. And while I won't do PowerPoint karaoke, you can read all this, but you know, it's a little more regional in scope, non-tourism, that is. It is somewhat tourist-based because if you have camping, kayaking, and passive outdoor recreation, you know, it is touristy, but it's not quite as retail as operating a velodrome or a water park or a sports arena. You've really got to turn some revenue out of those types of things. And as you notice here, if you have more of a Metro Parks model, typically there's broad access with free or low-cost entry. And I think going forward, as we start to advance our parks master plans, we have ambitions to make connections between urban and rural areas with greenways. I'm very encouraged by what I see both municipally and with the county in terms of either existing trail facilities or plans. There seems to be, you know, a real movement toward trying to make connecting trails between communities, and I personally think that's fantastic. Georgia, I'm afraid to admit, of course, Josh was spoiled in Athens. They have the Firefly Trail and the Oconee River Park, and yeah, you guys are rich, but yes, here, at least in this part of South Carolina, I'm very encouraged by what I see in trails, and there's even blueway connections as well with the rivers and tributaries and such. So for us, sort of reiterating in what Josh said in the lead, you know, we need to have a funding mechanism that aligns with our service delivery model. So I think there are very few options. In fact, this may be one of the only options to do it, but I hope to explain why it makes sense. But transitioning from an unincorporated recreation tax to a countywide parks tax, but I think with the kind of service model that we have that is sort of Metro Parkish, if you will, while it's differentiated from what the municipalities offer, it's also complementary to it. So I think if we were to transition from a unincorporated recreation tax to a countywide parks tax, we could ensure that we create a more equitable and sustainable funding approach. Okay, I'm just going to go through a little data. I'm not going to get too wonkish, although I could, because you know, I don't know if Josh likes to call me an econostatistician or a statisonomist, but you know, he knows that I like to, you know, cut the numbers pretty hard, and I could have gone a whole lot harder than this, but you know, I've got 3 other departments in my portfolio. But just to give you a little briefing, you know, the census numbers here that you notice, we had our 2020 official enumeration, and you can see, you know, the aggregate numbers, well, actually the aggregate ratios percentage-wise between the unincorporated and incorporated areas. And the census puts out intercensal estimates or vintage estimates annually. 24 is available at the county level. It's not available at the municipal level yet, but it probably will be in a couple of weeks. But it's not that big of a deal to use the 23 numbers, because we found out that countywide in 24 our growth is slowing just a little bit, and like you see here, there's a little bit of shrinkage in the gap between the unincorporated and incorporated population ratios as well. Just a little data tidbit for you, but it leads into some other things. Okay, now to the folks here who are with any municipalities, I'm going to try to explain how I managed and smoothed some of the data that you all presented, which thank you very much. It was great data. I wish I had a little more time to work with it. Wish I had a little more time to get some trend data, maybe over, a 2 to 4 year period. But ultimately, and I call this data or the data point, the 30,000 folks, if you will, I call them program registrants. Each city provides very different programming. Well, no, some is very similar and some is dissimilar. Obviously, Rock Hill, we got data from them. They have some robust programs with not only for youth and adults in athletics, but as well senior programs and lifetime learning and therapeutic and other things that I think I will probably be registering for myself pretty soon. But overall, with the unincorporated and incorporated registrants, it totals 30,000 people in the aggregate. But I had to pull out some potential data discrepancies, and again, I won't read all of those discrepancies. You can kind of see it. I tried to do as much apples to apples as I could. And then the other thing is that you're not, while you're measuring belly buttons, it may be somebody's belly button 2 or 3 times. If you were like my kids, who fortunately were pretty good athletes and weren't much in school, but they were pretty good athletes. So I'd have them involved in multiple sports or activities and things like that. So I try to account for the data in that way too. And then while Fort Mill was very, I don't want to say transparent, they offered additional data about the number, which is, pretty obvious considering how close we are to the state border, but they did give us data on out-of-state participants as well. And then I think there's probably a little bit of duplication that where some program registrants could go from municipal to municipal. Okay, I like Rock Hill for football, but I might want Lake Wiley or Fort Mill or Tega Cave for baseball or something for my kids, which is great. That's America, right? Okay, so I went a little bit further, and I had to kick out some of the smaller municipalities, and I didn't have any data at all for Lake Wiley. I didn't have enough time to maybe contact, I think it's LWAA. They may or may not have some data on program registration. I tried to get on their website, but I had to, I guess, put in my email address and such, and I was afraid they were going to charge me for that. But I didn't keep going on.
But we're happy to get that if people want to see it.
Yes, but we can definitely reach out to them. But I think this gives us a little bit of, info on how the unincorporated revenue tax, the amounts received, what the percentage of the total Parks and Recreation budgets are. I think, or it seemed when I looked at financial reports and such, that Rock Hill kicked out their tourism division. And then I estimated a subsidy where in a lot of these sheets it was called non-city program registrants. So the subsidy based on the amount of participation was a little bit different across the board. And before I get assailed for data cherry picking, I picked something easy like registration costs for youth baseball. I just went on the websites and looked at the base fees and so forth. So I'm not, making any significant judgments because I think there's more data you have to mine. But and then in the last column you can see the non-city, whether it's incorporated unincorporated residents, out of state, intermunicipal, or whatever. Those are the user ratios for each of the, we'll call them the bigger cities, or significant cities in population. And then using measures of central tendency, I just used a mean and medians, and you can see some of my data observations too. So it's subject to further analysis, but I think it gives a pretty good snapshot or an examination of, how municipal recreation services are utilized by either unincorporated or other registrants for these traditional programs. So there could be other variations, but I think the ones that may be the easiest to get a handle on in terms of potential funding options. Obviously, it's called the do-nothing approach, or maintain the status quo with the existing 1.5 mils for the unincorporated tax, subject to the unincorporated property owners and not the municipal property owners. You could have 3 options or scenarios for countywide park tax of 1.5 mils, dissolve the unincorporated tax, and have some kind of phase-out system. Option number 3, same thing, no phase-out. Option number 4, same thing again, but the county could consider using funds to help assist with needs-based capital expenditures, or for registrant stipends, scholarships, or whatever you want to call them, for unincorporated participants or registrants who could use the funds. So, not giving a specific recommendation, just kind of showing you a little bit of the universe of choices that could be made. So, I know this meeting isn't supposed to be a super deep dive, but on the same token, I'm more than willing to take any questions or any discussions or dialogue about the analysis. I'll be glad
Back to the options.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're more than happy to share what our staff perspective is in terms of the options as well, but we wanted to first answer those questions too, so I'm happy to kind of share where we're going. And the reason why this is important is, the second meeting in April, I need to deliver a recommended budget to you all. And so we talked about the sustainability of our parks, we talked about the current parks we're trying to build, we're talking about the new employees that are gonna work at those parks. And then, and this is really why these 2 items tonight are connected, the Parks Master Plan talks a lot about future parks. And without a future capital project funding source, we can't think about future parks, because we don't have a way to pay for them. So, Joe and I were happy to talk about Wood End and other Bethel Lake Valley parks in the second item, but we're really only talking about constructing with money we have. Future parks, there's no funding source for. And so that's why option 4 is developing a capital project fund for capital for parks, and we would designate that as county parks, including municipal parks if municipalities want to apply for those funds. And having talked with a lot of municipalities, I think there are opportunities to help with their capital funds that could help and provide that access to all York County residents with those capital infrastructure needs.
And I also want to say, Josh, very, very briefly, is that, I'm appreciative to all of the municipal personnel we've been able to interact with. I think we've had, good dialogues, and they've followed through and giving us some information we can make a perusal on. So, we're grateful for that too, because we're trying to build in your good relationships.
At our retreat on Saturday, we had a pretty good discussion with all of council, which was very helpful to get a feel for how the whole council is going to approach this idea, and it's not just the 3 of us making this decision. So the feeling I got from council from this discussion that we had, and Debbie, please correct me or interject if you have additional information, but was to pursue option 4 they were not in favor of option one at all, kicking this down the road, continuing its own. It's been going on for at least 4 years that I'm aware of, if not longer. But the whole entire council seemed to be on board with doing a countywide tax. And then, as part of that, there were a couple suggestions that were thrown out along with the countywide tax, which were either to set aside some part of it for a kind of a grant program for the municipalities. That way, y'all would submit a quick summary of some project that you want to do, and then we would look at it and go, yeah, this is something we can fund, and we would, provide money for some capital improvement. That way, it's a permanent thing out there for everybody to use. An example that was given was that I think it was Hickory Grove needed lights for their fields, and so they don't get nearly enough just to offset the cost of having county kids come out and play, but they had capital expenditures that they needed to fund. And that kind of went with a couple of the other municipalities that I talked to. And then there was also an idea thrown out to do either scholarships and or do a reimbursement for county kids. We would set some reimbursement rate, and then at some agreed upon schedule, maybe quarterly or something, the municipalities would submit, here's all the county kids that came and played, and we would reimburse it at a set rate, I don't know, $25, $30, $50 a kid, whatever the, it's come up with. We hadn't got that far yet, but based on some set amount. And then the scholarship option, which was what was mentioned in the strategic parks plan as a way to help offset hardships that taking this away would cause on some of the county kids. So that's so from the whole entire meeting we had on at the retreat, the countywide, that seemed to be pretty unanimous again across council. It seemed to get a lot of support, and giving some type of money to the municipalities to try to assist them seemed to have pretty broad support. The reimbursement and or scholarships, it was thrown out there, but I don't know if the meeting and the discussion just kind of veered off.
And there's administrative burden with that.
And there's other efforts with it. It didn't feel like that it was as supported as some of the other options. But
We really
but
didn't discuss the, for the municipality to give us, if they need something for, capital expenditures, we didn't really discuss an amount there. Is it gonna
No.
be like a set rate of the meals, or?
Well, I think part of this is we would need to design that, and we would design it if that's something you all think is gonna be the recommendation, and bring that back. I think the important thing to remember is that depending on the year, there might be a difference on how much we would set aside to the capital fund versus how much we're gonna need for operations of our current parks. And so as we grow our park system, we're gonna have more and more operational needs. And if there's a desire to fund future parks for the county, then this might be a source for that too. But that depends on the future parks master plans and the work we do based on studying where future parks might need to be. And that's a down the road question. And so I don't want to overcommit to what that amount's going to be every single year. I think what we need to do is design a structure that allows us to help municipalities with capital needs, and we'll develop criteria on what that looks like, and when we would do that, and who gets what in a given year. But I think that's really based on need, and us making sure we're utilizing those resources.
And I guess, so, I would, just hang on. The one thing to think about in talking about bringing things back or further in, I would like to be able to make a motion as soon as possible. So that everybody, because we're all in the budget process, so that we can all have an idea of what we're trying to do and not be scrambling at the last second if something comes up, next month as we get closer and closer to the budget. That's all I wanted to mention. Go
Okay,
ahead.
sounds good. First of all, apologize I was late. This came in when I got off my last call, and I took the time to read through this and try to digest it, and that made me late getting here, so I apologize to everybody that had to wait on me to walk into the room today. But I
We
wanted to be-
apologize if this is late, so.
But I wanted to be prepared. Yeah, I think this came in at 3:35 or so. So, to start out with, I want to ask a question. You may not have the answer to this question, but when you look out 10 years or so, will York County be in the active recreation business or the passive recreation business?
That's really up to future councils.
Right.
With y'all and future councils, I can't answer that, but we did a Parks Master Plan, and that Parks Master Plan interviewed who was in the council seats at that time, and we've heard council members as we've developed the strategic plan, and it's very clear to me that our council is saying passive recreation. I can't project 10 years from now. What I
Right.
do know is, if you just look at the current parks, the top of that we're building now, phase one, finishing that. If we were to ever dream of phase two and phase three, there's no money
Right.
for that. So
So
even if
I'm
we're
speaking
doing
to that
passive
perspective.
recreation and just that, we don't have money for it. I think you gotta set field day aside,
Mhm.
because that's a tax district, and I know we transferred money from this last year, 400,000, to fill the gap at field day. But if this goes away, then field day's gotta be self-supportive, so that's kind of a set aside over here, that they would have to raise the millage.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to look at this very objectively. And one of the things I have to take into consideration is, why are we where we are right now? And the county is where we are right now because we've run very lean over the years. That's a good thing. But we've overlooked their needs. Catawba Bend, the county bought, I don't know what year it was, but 2018. So we're 7 years later, and we didn't have any money budgeted for phase one, phase two, or phase three. So you said in the beginning that we're trying to take care of our parks, but I think we also have to think about our citizens, and what does that mean? So assuming that we're gonna be in passive recreation, which we probably should, there'd be no need in us competing against municipalities, in my opinion, then let's take that into consideration. So I try to think through this realistically, and I say, okay, and I was surprised basically when I looked at these numbers of, on page 6, I think it is. Let's see, is that page 6? Yeah, page 6. When I look at the numbers on the far right side, and Tom, thank you for putting all this together. This was helpful for me to digest this even better. But you look at the numbers, Clover, 70% are from the unincorporated area, 52% Fort Mill, 56% Rock Hill, 60% TKK, and 77% York.
Not unincorporated, non-city. So
Non-city,
that's one of the things
okay.
we can't, with the time we have with the data.
Margin of error, that's eye-opening. What this tells me is this. So if we want to be in passive recreation, that means that the municipalities are in active recreation. So let's look for an example of active recreation that we know our numbers, and that's Field Day Park. So you look at Field Day Park and you say, okay, Field Day Park provides recreation for predominantly Lake Wiley Clover, but there are people from Rock Hill and York that go over there, right? What does it cost for Field Day Park? Field Day Park spends about $1 million a year in their budget. Arguably, it might be $900,000 for 2025-26. I don't know. Let's say it's $1 million.
And then 1.1 in debt service.
Right. I'm just gonna round numbers. 1.2 in debt service, so that's 2.2 that we're spending at Field Day Park with operations and debt service. Debt service was, I think, on a 10-year window, so eventually that debt service will be paid off. But when the debt service pays off, our operating expenses won't be $1 million. It'll probably be 1.5, 1.6, 1.8, 10, whatever, 2, whatever it is. We don't know. But what we do know is the turf's gonna have to be replaced, buildings have to be upgraded,
Yeah.
other buildings have to be built, there will be other
We're
expenses.
building them right now, yeah.
Exactly. So you have the deferred expense costs for Field Day Park that's on the horizon as well. Here's what I'm getting at. We have one live example of active recreation that we're in that's costing us $2.2 million a year in one area of the county. You look at Clover, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, TDK. If we were in the business of recreation, we would be budgeting $10-12 million a year for the unincorporated residents to have recreation. But instead, we're allocating what did we allocate last year total? 1.8, 1.9 million, 1.6 million. We allocated 1.6 million to the municipalities to run recreation for the unincorporated areas of the county. I think that's a wise investment. Now, what's the issue? The issue's been the formula, and that's what we could not, well, yes, we as council, and I'll say we as council because I voted on this twice, we as council have struggled with the formula. But
Head north towards Central Carolina.
I don't think, I'm just one council member, and I understand that we're looking for money. I want to go back to what you said, Josh, because you're right. And I think it's important for the whole, everybody here to understand this. Compliments to Josh and his staff that he's brought in, because I would say, as a citizen of the county, you're sitting in a county right now who is intentionally trying to plan the future of this county government out and what we're doing. That's a good thing. We just did our first strategic plan. Well, I don't know if it's the first, but it's the first one I've been involved with. And with that strategic plan, there's a ton of money that we're gonna have to look for to accomplish the things we need to accomplish. And I wanna go back to what I said a minute ago. This county is run extremely lean, no offense to anybody that was involved previously, very little vision. That's one of the reasons why I joined county council, because I was hoping that I could contribute to some of that myself. So nonetheless, the strategic plan's put in place. We're looking at fire. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on, and you're talking about millions upon millions of dollars we gotta find to do this, right? So of course, it looks attractive to go to this pool of money and say, let's pull it inward, because I'd like for it to be spent on Catawba Bend, invested in Catawba Bend. There are things I'd like to do out of Catawba Bend, and we gotta get the phase finished for me to go out there and do it. But is that the right decision? I'm not sure it is, because if we're gonna be in passive recreation, that means that we're gonna have the municipalities contribute towards the recreation for the county. The way I see it, we're getting a heck of a deal right now at 1.6 million. We already know Field Day Park's costing us 2.2, and we're investing more money in Field Day Park.
It's costing that tax district.
I understand, but it's still costing 2.2 for just that area, not Clover, Fort Mill. So when the unincorporated areas of the county do populate one day, and they will, when water and sewer gets out there, unless we don't, and they just get annexed, because we lost 2 or 3% of our population between last year and this year, just in annexation, then somebody's gonna have to provide services to those citizens. And is it gonna be us, or is it gonna be them? And I would say we're getting a heck of a deal. So, personally, I think we need to work on the formula. Is it based on student head count? Is it based on population? What is it? I mean, we could figure that out, but I personally think, I hate that, I'm gonna be careful to say what I was gonna say next, because there are other examples in the county right now where we're benefiting from certain operations operating one way, and it's gonna cost us a whole lot more for it to operate differently in the future. So,
Well,
why would you do away with a good thing?
Councilman Huckabee, one thing I would alert you to though is if you look at the non-city user ratios, you might think of that as a placeholder for demand for active recreation services in alignment with the way the county's population grows and where it grows geographically. You know, over time, if nothing changed at all, I would feel very secure in saying that the numbers in the York area and the Clover area are going to close in to the median ratio, 56%, which is essentially Rock Hill. So as the population growth keeps moving eastward, or I'm sorry, not eastward, westward or southwest, you know, again, if nothing changed, that would, those numbers or ratios would close. But that's congruent to what future demand is going to be. So what I was trying to illustrate in my analysis is that I think when you make investments in active recreation, you're talking about things such as the cities, all of the cities really have done, building community centers, pocket parks, neighborhood parks, community parks, you know, sort of an ecosystem which can be taken advantage of when you have the scale economies that you have geographically with a more urbanized area. I mean, I don't want to denigrate anything our parks people would say, because recreation professionals are very pro active program recreation. But I think if knowing the numbers the way we do, knowing what the cost it would be to finish Catawba Bend and some of the other bigger parks, I think the Metro Park model would really, at least for the next generation, complements and enhances what the cities have all beautifully provided.
Yes, sir. Well, flip back to page 5 right quick, because I want to clarify 30,000. We're saying there are 30,205. Are we saying there's 30,205 unincorporated individuals that utilize the parks? Of those 5, no.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Unless we ask
We're
all the cities.
guesstimating?
These are people, these are unduplicated counts of people who are program registrants
Sure.
in all of the
Could
cities.
be the same person with 5
Mhm.
programs.
Right.
Yeah, or they could come from out of state or intermunicipal or whatever. I mean, we could probably, I think with the help of the city, segregate enough data. I think if their registration systems are robust enough to maybe get a pretty good grab to segregate the unincorporated numbers. But it's probably not going to be that much, I would guess,
Mhm.
out of the 30,000. But you never know.
Well, using that number, I calculated $70 a head. So we're investing $70 a head into the 30,000, if I'm correct,
Correct.
using the 59%.
Yeah, and I think if you, to do that, and we talked a little bit about these sports leagues when they're run by a third party, I think that's a unique thing too. And if we ever want to unpack, you know, field day, I think in future meetings we could talk about how field day operates and how there's third party groups running those leagues. And to me, that's where this gets fuzzy, because should that third party league decide that it's important if a kid's from Rock Hill versus Fort Mill versus Teagut Head versus unincorporated? I think the Charlotte Independent Soccer League wants great soccer players from wherever.
Right.
So why would we encourage them to decide who gets to play when it's a third party league? So I think that's one of the hard parts about this is, you know, sports has changed
Right.
since this came into being. And I think we need to change with that, and make sure we're providing passive parks for the entire county.
So to summarize my comments, I believe a $1.6 million investment in the entire county to have municipalities run our active recreation is the best decision this council can make. And if we unwind this, we might find ourselves in the active recreation business and maybe wish we weren't. Or our citizens may not have access to the services. I don't know how you all are gonna react. Are you gonna charge a fee, or are you gonna turn them away? I don't know what you're gonna do. But for $1.6 million, I know we need the money at Catawba Bend and other parks, but
Well, I would say, as the county manager said, we, as part of the unraveling and repackaging, you know, we have to design, we have to design a system. It may not be necessarily to make the municipalities whole, but there's a theory in Parks and Recreation literature, it's called, you know, the functionalism of user fees. Unfortunately, you never get full cost recovery, unless you're running an enterprise fund, you never get full cost recovery out of a parks or recreation service unless the demand is so great and you're just lucky. So I think if we were to do further analysis, and that's where I think I had made a mention of the needs-based approach, whether it's capital or registrant stipends, because, okay, we may have parks like Catawba Bend or Ebenezer, and even if there's no cost area for entry to walk on, say, a trail, how is a lower income individual either gonna get transportation to go enjoy it, or even if there are modest fees to camp or hike or do a kayak, are they going to have enough money or income, household income to do that? So to Josh's point, I think as we go into design to figure out, you know, what to do in transitioning, we're going to be very conscious and intentional about addressing the concerns you just spoke of.
Right. Well, in closing, option 4, countywide tax is what I'm in favor of, but I'm not in favor of an option that puts the municipalities at a disadvantage. And I don't think it's in our best interest to do that. I think long-term we'll regret it. But I'm just one person and I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just realistically thinking about what we're paying right now, 1.6. And Field Day Park's costing 2.2. And you got deferred maintenance. And you got the issues of even managing it. There's more cost to it than that. But anyway, it's my opinion. I'm one person of one of 7. So I try to take my time to digest this and think about it realistically, not showing any part. I live in Rock Hill, not showing partiality to Rock Hill or Fort Mill or anywhere else. I'm just trying to think about it realistically.
Do you want us to make a recommendation? I mean, is that what we're gonna do to council?
I think part of us balancing our budget and developing a recommended budget is dependent on this, and so I think it's important for us to think about the future and make a decision that sets us up to be successful in accomplishing the Parks Master Plan. And just because you've done something doesn't mean you should continue to do it, and I think that's where, as staff, we've given you all options, but it does tie to what we want to achieve long-term with our current parks and future parks. And so the decisions that are made on this will begin to limit the potential future options on all those other things. And I think that's where you put yourself in the box. What we have set up is very unique, right? So I think typically what you will find is cities and counties try to collaborate but not duplicate, right? So I don't know in the future if the county should build in anything else like Field Day. Field Day was a choice of that area to tax themselves. It wasn't the county.
Yeah.
And so I think Field Day is a one-off. I wouldn't recommend another one of that. I would say the county should be involved in passive recreation and do that the best we can.
So how do we take care of the citizens then?
So typically what happens is a county resident in an unincorporated area gets charged a different rate. Somebody from another state, somebody from another county. Fort Mill had 12% who were out of county and state. They were able to capture that data, which is helpful. So that's a significant percent of who's using their services. So you would have a different fee structure. And I think that's perfectly fine. The problem, when we talked about this and Tom's data, when he looked at analyzing this, is this revenue source isn't accounting for the people using the service. It's supporting operations of some of these departments.
Mhm.
Some departments were able to not really tell what other revenue they're using, like Rock Hill, I think, generates a lot of revenue and tourism that they put towards parks. So every city is very different here, and I think they all have different ways of funding parks. But the smaller you get, the more they're using this on operations. I think what's also unique is Clover and York run a lot of their own rec leagues, which is different than the municipalities on this side of the county. And so, that is a unique difference, and I think, there's more need for them to use this on operating costs to run those programs themselves. So I think there's a lot of differences, but I try to boil things down to simple kind of terms, and I think what's best for York County is if we focus on passive, and we do that really well. And then there's the opportunity for municipalities to charge unincorporated residents more, which you would typically find in other counties. So that's what I would hope would happen.
And I'm a big fan of making sure that everybody is treated fair and equally. And I understand what you're saying with, when I came in, I'm not gonna lie, I was all about taking it away from municipalities, and just having them deal with their things and we'll do with our things. But, after talking to some people, that's not necessarily the right thing to do. So I'm coming around on it, but the way it's currently funded is not, I don't feel like it's fair. I feel like the municipalities are taking advantage of us. They feel like they're getting taken advantage of, but if we allocate and keep allocating 1.6 million to them, but yet we want to fund parks, that means we're going to have to raise taxes on all of the citizens to do that. And I am a proponent of user fees over increased taxes on everybody. And so what I would prefer is for us to work out some plan again, where we can help them with their capital costs and they charge the additional user fee to the county residents to use their facilities. But in the event that isn't an option, looking through these numbers here, I was looking at the per capita spending on all of this, and based on those numbers and averaging them out, knowing that probably 2/3 of your budget is just pure capital costs and maintenance costs and has nothing to do with running the programs, it looked like it averages out somewhere around $80 to $90 a person. So if we took 1/3 of that,
I came with $70.28.
so if we did a stipend or a refund of, let's say, $25 to $30 registering back to the municipalities, I think that would cover their additional costs and some of the upkeep they have. And I think that's about as fair as you're gonna get. And the good part about doing that is that you'll have hard data after the first year, and we can look at, do we need to adjust that number? How's that working out for them? How's that working out for us?
Debbie, what are you thinking?
Well, in our meeting, option 4 was very popular. And I do think that we definitely can give if they have a development need, that should give them the opportunity to, I know we're gonna have criteria there, which we should, and then they could give us the, what their needs are in a capital expense. Because if you look, that's what they're using it for, basically. So it would help them to work at like the lights on the field or whatever special projects that they have. So it's not that we're really taking anything away, we're offering it in a different light, a different option.
Well, they would lose in revenue.
Well, yeah, but we gotta have some too.
You understand? So if you're gonna go with option 4, and if you think council's gonna go with option 4, I personally then would like to see the phased approach put into option 4, a 3-year phase out, and the opportunity for future capital, but current stipends for the registrants to attempt to make up some of the difference as we phase out of the allocation.
So you wanna do the phasing plus stipends?
Like option 2.
Yep.
But isn't the phasing supposed to cover the stipend?
It is, that's the way I think it.
In theory, that's,
Yeah, so I'm suggesting a 3-year phase so that all the municipalities have time to respond and react to having, I mean, right now, if we cut Rock Hill, I think they got $431,000 last year, maybe 481,
480.
480, they got 480, so, I mean, their budget year is coming up too. Not that they can't find it, but what's the difference between a half and a third? Minuscule. But then you could say, okay, then why not just go a half? So I'm just saying a third and then put the stipends in place. The stipends aren't gonna replace the income loss, right?
And it's not to, in my opinion, it's not to replace that.
I understand.
And that was something that the guy that did our study recommended,
Yeah.
which I thought was
Dr. Brooker, yeah.
something
I agree.
good to do for.
Well, I would just, when I say caution, just thinking out loud, really. I think if you're going to do a stipend system, I believe Josh alluded to it earlier, it's going to be a little bit of an administrative burden for
Yeah.
both,
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it will
agree.
be.
for both the
Yeah.
city and the county.
We just have to
And just,
see what we can work out,
just playing
right?
advocate, not the bad advocate, but just an
Yeah.
advocate, you know, I think, not knowing that the municipalities still may raise some of their user fees for unincorporated citizens too, because, I think the other thing we have to keep in mind, and this is where we have to calibrate and collaborate with the cities, and if we're gonna try to do this, is that it's just simple economics. You know, your supply and demand curves, your equilibrium is going to change, and there's gonna be certain marginally, a few unincorporated users who aren't going to use the municipal programs anymore because it may be priced out. So I think you have to be conscious, or we have to be conscious of making those kinds of measurements. It's not like the equilibrium's gonna, you know, slope way down here or up or anything like that. But it's the same thing with the tax incidence on raising property taxes.
Right.
You know, so, you know, you gotta look at economic and financial efficiency in doing this, but it's picking a number that keeps things on the margin, and that's what helps take the pain or the poison pill off.
Well, here's where I'm at. I am not in favor of a phase out of option 2. If you two want to vote for it, I mean, I'm okay with y'all doing whatever, but I'm not in favor of that. I'm in favor of option 4. Is where I'm at, and how we divvy it out later is where we're at. We are running up on an hour now.
Yeah. So, I'm in favor
I
of
hate to put y'all put anybody in a bind for the budgeting coming up if we push this off another month.
Yeah.
Do y'all want to,
Well, in my recommended budget, this time next month I've already presented, so I will have our
right,
staff solution at that point.
And so we just make the recommendation to council, is that what?
If y'all are ready to make a recommendation, yeah, and then we'll draft a staff report and the full council can talk about it at that meeting that the staff reports out.
is anybody prepared for a motion?
No, I'm not.
What happens if we don't make a motion tonight? Give us our,
Then I'm gonna have to make a decision.
You're
based
gonna-
on the feedback I've gotten at the retreat.
He's gonna have to pull the money from somewhere else to make these decisions. From another tax source.
Okay. And then how we're gonna get the, capital expenses, is that gonna be a formula, or how, are you guys gonna come up with a plan on that?
We'll develop a plan, and we can talk more about that. I think the question is, how much of that revenue source do we need for current operations versus future capital needs? And then, once we have that number, and it could change in a given year, we'll start contributing that to capital project that then municipalities can apply for.
I could possibly, and I made a Joe Namath guarantee on Saturday, I'm not sure I wanna go there tonight, but, you know, if you look at option 4, it could be sort of looked at as an inverted phase out or a phase in. You know, if we get adequate growth from, the new tax, or the transition tax and other sources, you know, it may bring a little more of the pain on the front end, but it may lessen the pain over the 3 or 4 year period.
That's
You know where I'm going with that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Something else to think about, on the stipends, so realistically, what do you think the differential would be between incorporated and unincorporated for a fee? $20?
Well, that's gonna be up to the individual municipality providing the
But
service.
realistically, what do you think, $20?
No, we would come up with a set reimbursement.
We would come up with a stipend, but
Yeah.
it's a user fee, so
That's correct.
a user fee is supposed to meant to charge the person receiving the service, so.
Well, then we
that's-
wouldn't be reimbursing.
Again, that's why the setup, I think, needs, of this current.
The
setup
reason I'm
is
saying this
visible.
is, if you had a $20 stipend per unincorporated, and you got 30,000 users right now, that's $600,000 you'd be reimbursing potentially off the $30,000 current, if that's correct, you know, plus or minus. If you reimburse $20, that's $600,000, right?
Right.
Then you go back, you're giving 1.6 million away right now.
Yep.
Then you go back and you factor in capital cost for 100, 200, 300 times, you know, even Sharon, Hickory Grove, your work's growing, everybody's growing,
Right.
everybody has needs, so, great question. What does a capital investment really mean? Is it capped at a, based per capita to a dollar amount? You gotta think about that, because when you
Yeah.
start adding it up, you get to 1.6 million probably pretty
Well,
quickly.
And let's expand on that. So, currently, if we go to the countywide tax, a countywide meal is 1.8 some, so 1.5 of that is,
I'm in favor of the countywide tax. What I'm struggling with is the
2.1, I
impact
think it was
on
2.1.
municipalities.
So we would be at 2.1 if we allocated like half of that. It wouldn't be too bad, and then I don't know that I would wanna do the capital fee and the stipend.
Yeah, we have-
I would wanna pick one or the other. So either one of those is real easy to adjust, after, in the future. I would, if I really wanted to pick one to go with, that would be to compromise with you and to try to keep the counties as whole, or the municipalities as whole as possible. I could do the reimbursement, do the countywide, do a reimbursement of, it was 18,000, you came up with $70. Do a reimbursement of $70 per thing and see where we end up.
We'd have to have better data.
Yeah, we end up spending more money doing that, though.
If we get more,
We end up spending,
people.
based on 30,000, do 2.1.
Well, it's not 30,000, that was 30,000 total people. The number of,
Times $70 reimbursement.
it
is
was
2.1 million.
18,600 actual county residents.
Yeah, you're right, 17,000, I came up with 17,000.
And so,
829.
and I think there's a lot of ways to do this, but My goal is that the water gets clearer, not muddy.
Right.
So that's why we had an or up there,
Yeah.
because to me, you should just pick one.
Yeah, I don't wanna pick one, but,
Yeah.
you know, then setting whether we set the rate tonight or try to set it at a future date, I want to try to make sure everybody can get into their budget process, at least having some idea of
Mhm.
where we're going, is the reason that I'm kinda looking for that. I mean, even this isn't gonna be clear until we get to the full council, and then they get to bat it all over the place.
It is gonna
I
be.
think between now and then, though, we can advance on designing the system. You know, another way to perhaps lower the administrative burden, acknowledging reliable data is important, is that there are counties in Maryland and Virginia, Montgomery County, Maryland, outside of DC, for example. They have kind of a rebate system. So that reduces the number of transactions that we have to carry out for this kind of thing. I mean, you can call it anything you want, you know, I didn't know what a tranche was until, you know, COVID came. But at the end of the day, yeah, we would have to skedaddle to put the design together. And while I wouldn't give the Jonema guarantee that it's gonna be perfect, I think we can advance it to the point where the council can make a confident decision in the context of the budget.
Yeah, and we can design it as a either or. If you wanna do capital, you could do this in FY 2026 and into the future. And if you wanna do a stipend, you could do this, and this is what that might look like.
Okay.
So that makes
I
sense.
got option 4 then, with you guys doing some more work on this.
And then we can put that in our memo that goes to the full council as options for you all to consider.
Okay,
So,
you good with that?
yeah.
All right, what's your motion?
For option 4, with the, management doing some
Evaluating either
Evaluating
the
and
capital
some
or the
formulas,
stipend.
yeah.
Okay. All right, that's a motion on
I'm aware. Thank you. I know, he's asking for a second.
Is that a no?
No, I'm just stuck on phased approach, part of the phased approach in option 4.
We can work with phasing out during in how much we reimburse or give them.
And we can, I mean, I
We
think.
could allocate the whole 1.6 in the secondary part of money.
But if we're doing that, what's the point?
Well, it gets a better formula, is one thing, even if we just got a better formula.
Well, that's what I was saying.
You need a
That's what I was
second to
saying.
debate,
Yeah,
so you can
okay.
second.
I can second?
Yes,
Oh, I
sir.
didn't think I could second, all right, I second.
Now, discussion.
Now, well,
Well,
do you want to
discussion.
discuss?
Discussion, so now we're having
Well,
discussion.
All right.
I've discussed.
I hear what
Alright.
you're saying, but this goes back to the formula.
Okay, it
right?
does. I mean, there's always a formula to it.
And remember that Lake Wiley was a part of this, you know, so if we keep giving the stipend, we're gonna give it to Lake Wiley too. I mean, and I think that's part of the muddy water here, though, as we designated 400,000 Lake Wiley, so if we're gonna do the stipend, we're gonna do it for Lake Wiley as well.
All right, let's solve this. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Opposed?
2-1, passes. Thank you. All right. Second item is, discussion regarding the Parks Master Plan recommendations. All right, y'all have a presentation for this?
We don't,
No.
we wanted to talk through this with you, and Joe's here to answer any questions. So some of the key follow-ups from the last conversation, the feedback we need from y'all is, what do we want to think about in terms of the current parks? So as we talked about last time, y'all helped with that extra 1.2 million during this year to help staffing the current parks. But in terms of the current parks that we own, the land we own, and what we do with it, that's a recommendation we want to come from this committee, before we begin to talk about future parks outside of that. So there were a number of questions that came up last time. One was, can we sell property? And I know the county attorney's here and we can talk a little bit more about that. But the second one was, so we've got Catawba Bend. What is the other project? And I know Tom's gone to Bethel Lake Wiley Advisory Committee. There's about $3 million left. Some of the conversation we've had with y'all is, what's it gonna take to give access to at least one of those properties in the Bethel Lake Wiley District? We've heard that feedback from the advisory committee as well. And so Joe's got some information to answer that question, and we can talk about that tonight. And I do think in terms of next year, it behooves us to have a plan for how we will spend that $3 million remaining. I think it's important that we spend that and give access to at least one of these parks. And I think that's what we're ready to talk about tonight. What we could do with that $3 million.
So, my thoughts on this discussion is this is a multi-meeting discussion. Is there an action item that y'all are looking for budget-wise for tonight?
I think that the $3 million is in the Bethel Lake Wiley tax district fund. So the money is there. At some point, we will need to designate it for a project. You could always do that mid-year. What I want to make sure we understand as staff is, what will it take to mobilize and give access to one of those parks, because there's operating implications if we do that. And so if there's the recommendation to pick one of them like Wood End, and do the very basic things we need to do to open it, there's staff implications. And it's always a good thing to know in advance. One of the things that's before us in terms of the budget is, based on the operations of the Bethel Lake Wiley District, we're gonna have to actually lower the millage in the coming budget, based on current expenses. Now, if y'all want us to work on opening very quickly access to Wood End, that might change the operating, and we might keep the millage at what it is right now. But we're contemplating lowering the millage for the Bethel Lake Wiley Tax District at this point. So that is a budget consideration. But if we want to give basic access, then there's work that comes with that, and then there's staff implications, and we have to then study the implications that has on staff. If we want to use all $3 million in one of those parks, that's gonna take, obviously, as y'all know, that's gonna be a project that we wanna work with the advisory committee to develop ideas on what we can do and what's the best use of those $3 million to give access in a different way.
So for an overall, I would like to, so part of the strategic master plan parks, for the parks was to unwind kind of these special tax districts and try to get all of it under the umbrella of the county. In order to do that, I feel like we need to straighten out and get these things into a nice package and then start doing that. So what do we look like on the Bethel Lake Wiley Parks Preservation thing? Can we get rid of some of the properties and to get additional funding?
Well, that's a legal matter I would take up in executive session with the committee if you like.
Okay.
But the basic question is, you would not have the benefit to use any proceeds from the sale of the property.
Okay.
Where would those proceeds go?
I'm
Assuming
happy
we could sell it.
to talk about this in greater detail in executive
Executive
session.
session, okay.
Another thing that we gotta keep in mind is the committee.
Right.
When we, bring something to the table
Mhm.
like this, that we make sure that we've gone through council and gotten it approved to bring to the committee. So I think that that's where a lot of the confusion on this issue is, currently, that, it was not put out to the whole committee, to the whole council.
You're talking about selling two pieces of property, right?
Well, and currently, there's some
That is a
confusion.
county asset, which would require
Right.
discussion.
And it's just gotta be referred from council
Yes,
to
ma'am.
this committee.
Yes, ma'am.
So then the question on the table is, you got $3 million, do you want to invest it in Wood End, or do you want to invest it in Field Day Park, or a little bit both? So what do you,
So
what's your-
part of your, in the last meeting was, you know, you weren't in favor of the goat farm selling it, which, so all of that kind of rotates into, in my opinion, the master plan altogether to figure out how to use the money. Were you able to look at, so I did meet with Catherine, before she went out and had her baby. And, I kinda asked, you know, was there a big picture, could we use the goat farm as the dog park, as we discussed in the last committee meeting? Were you able to get any information on doing that?
Not about the goat farm, just with the traffic flow and whatnot. That's definitely an option on the table. But we have not discussed that option in
Okay.
great detail because we really would like, this is a really obtuse problem and we're looking for just a little bit of a direction from y'all so we can really do a deep dive and present y'all with some good options. But we've got such a big, wide problem here, and we don't want to waste y'all's time or waste staff's time developing those options. We would really like just to focus on one bite of that elephant at a time if we could. I feel like that would be the best use of staff time and your time and the dollars that we do have already allocated.
Okay.
I guess, quick
And you're
question.
saying like possibly Wood End, get that going before
That would
we-
be our recommendation, but we would like to hear y'all's priorities. That one seems like it's the most feasible to get off the ground the quickest and offer the most recreational appeal. But again, we would really like to have y'all's thoughts and really point us in the direction you want us to go.
Well, I think there's also some folks, some other council members that have some suggestions on this too. So that's why I was saying, I don't really feel comfortable about us making unless we're just gonna make a recommendation, then it goes back before council and have a discussion.
So, yeah, and so what I would say is the Parks Master Plan implementation is what was the charge, right? So, looking at the recommendations, and we talked about this the last meeting, we put the recommendations up on the screen, and one of them is to address the tax districts. And so, an important part of that is deciding how to spend the $3 million in the Bethel Lake Wiley tax district. So, at this point, yeah, you don't need to think about unwinding them. There's a period of time where it makes sense to first develop them. The problem with Bethel Lake Wiley is you can't develop any of those parks with that $3 million. It's not going to finish anyway. So the county is going to have to come up with whatever we end up doing of the differential. And anything in staff that goes above that 500,000 plus inflation is going to be a county general fund contribution for that. And so that's the fundamental problem, and that's why the implementation of the Parks Master Plan is in front of y'all. That $3 million, we need to spend and invest in that tax district. Then the county needs to decide how much they want to contribute into the future. And so that really is a core piece of the implementation of the Parks Master Plan, which y'all's recommendation from that needs to go to the full council. But you can talk about all those pieces and recommendations first before you do the recommendation if you want. But to us, this conversation about what to do with that $3 million is something that needs to be decided as quickly as possible because we have a lot of work to do. And when you develop a tax district like this and you fund it the way this was set up, there's an expectation that those funds be spent expeditiously.
Is there a staff implication of investing the money in Field Day Park?
So that's a totally separate tax district.
Can't spend that money there.
Can't spend it there.
No.
So the Wood End is the only place we could spend it.
So the $3 million is for construction and acquisition. Conceivably, you could buy more open space with it and preserve it. I mean, so there's a lot of things you could
Can't
do.
just be preserved.
But what we're hearing from the advisory committee is they want one of these parks accessible. That's the clear feedback we're hearing. And so what we're doing as staff is saying, okay, Joe, what would you need just to give access to Wood End? And those are the numbers he's prepared to do. In terms of the goat farm, if that's what you all want to do, that would be a different calculus, building a parking lot there that would provide more parking. And if you're talking about Thistle, that would be a totally different calculus. So to us,
Plan
it's,
to make a motion.
okay,
Make
sorry
a
to keep
motion that we
talking.
invest $3 million into Wood End.
You second?
Yeah, second.
All right. A motion and a second, any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none?
Do your
3
work.
million to
Go to work.
that.
Thank you.
And just I don't want to interrupt there, but as a question, for the attorney, as I hear that, there's a finite amount of money in the Bethel Lake Wildland Tax District. And so my interpretation of that was use what's remaining to figure out the best plan for Wood End, but it's not an exact 3 million.
It is not exact
Right.
3 million, there's overarching financial considerations that require that you need to monitor the expenditures over time.
Yeah.
But subject to those regulatory requirements, you can use those funds.
Okay, and we'll develop a staff
And you're-
report that explains all that.
Would you prefer for us to amend the motion?
That's what I was asking.
You could amend that motion just for clarity. Subject to financial restrictions, you could use the balance on Wood End.
All right, so the motion is for us to use the balance that is available for Wood End.
And I second.
Subject to those financial guidelines and restrictions for the use of those funds.
Subject to financial guidelines and restrictions for the use of those funds.
All right, thank you.
Feel like
I
we're getting
see.
married.
All in
Thanks for that,
favor?
guys.
Now, one part of that that goes with it though is, again, it goes with the master plan, which is knowing which amenities that they're gonna spend that money on. Does that go to, how is that, so how do we incorporate the amenities of that part with the overall strategic plan for the whole county, along with tying in the advisory committee into that too? So.
So what our plan is with this direction is take the master plan and look at what are our immediate needs to provide basic access, what are our have-tos, whether it's dealing with the structures that are there, providing access, and parking area, very basic, low level of access. What does that require? What's left of the balance? And starting to look at how can we maximize those dollars that are left, kind of taking that a la carte approach of what's on the master plan, what are those elements, and how can we get as many of those with what's left as we can to provide recreational opportunities on that property.
So, that master plan has you're talking about the one that was developed for the property itself?
Correct, yep.
So
And
It's a
it has-
concept plan.
That's
yeah.
right.
the balance won't be enough to do all of that. It'll be a very small amount once we get basic access and those operational considerations.
But it was designed as a standalone park and not incorporated into the larger county park system. So I wouldn't want just to go and just build things in there that don't necessarily go to that location that should possibly be in another location, which is where it gets into the second phase of the strategic master plan, which is picking out where the amenities actually need to be stationed within the county, like the ag, arena, thing that you've been talking about, where does that go in the grand scheme of the whole county? So how do we provide, who provides those kind of guidelines to make sure, you're
Sure.
gonna,
So what we would
Do
recommend
something.
is, again, we would work with the governing board to, again, what do we have to have basic access?
Okay.
What are those elements we have to address before we can allow public on the site? Deal with those first and foremost, because regardless of what we
Okay.
do, we've got to deal with those elements first. After that's done, we'll work with taking that master plan, coming up with staff recommendation, getting some input from the board and some directions from them, and likely circling back with y'all to say, here's what everybody agrees upon, and if that's the direction y'all approve, we'll go and do it. And if not, we'll make some changes.
will you, so I talked to the staff, because 557 is being built right there, and there's a signalized intersection that's being built right there, but yet the, master plan didn't have us tying our entrance in right there, which doesn't make sense, and so there's one entrance on the gravel road going down the road just right in, right out,
Right.
when we have a signalized intersection that would be safer for everybody to
Sure.
enter and exit. So what I would like for y'all to be aware of and ask of staff is, investigate, and I know they're looking into it kind of, to see what it would cost to try to get that entrance prepared for the park while we're doing construction there already.
Mm-hmm.
So we've asked about that, and I don't have a firm figure
Right.
for you, but what I was told was it would significantly delay the project as well as
Really?
increase the cost because of the adding the additional signals. Again, I'm not an engineer, so I
Right.
can't speak to that, but those poles have load limits as well as the lines and everything like that. They've already been ordered for the existing plan, and those take, there's approximately a 6 to 8 month lead time on those.
Okay.
And so to increase the loads of those for the additional signals and whatnot, are also significantly more expensive because of the increased load capacity of those poles, is what we were told.
Is there any other area in the county where we could use those poles that have that load capacity?
We're happy to talk with our engineering
Right.
team and bring more information next meeting.
Mhm.
I think in terms of the 3 million, that's gonna help us get access to Wood End, but there's not gonna be a lot left for amenities. You know, maybe something like a dog park or something that's low cost, if you think about what really goes into a dog park. But trails, building trails, a parking lot,
A
Roads.
staff person.
roads, well, the staff person will be afforded out of the operating piece of it. And so all those things, I mean, when you look at the 3 million, they start to go
Very quickly.
But I think with Wood End, that would be where we get the most ROI with the 3
I
million.
just hate that we missed that opportunity, because we're gonna have to so we're spending the money twice to build 2 entrances.
But we're not giving up on that. We're gonna continue
Mhm.
to figure out what we can do. Part of it has to do with width there too. But yes, the time to have done that would have been a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago likely, as they were working on this. So I do agree that that's too bad, but we're not giving up on that yet. Give us some time to work on it.
That's encouraging.
Okay.
All right, next item is to approve minutes from the January 28th
Motion,
meeting.
motion to approve the minutes from.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
So do you have?
I would like to hear it, unless y'all don't have time.
Are we gonna do an executive?
You can have, receive legal advice, regarding the sale of currently held Federal Lake Wildlife properties.
Make a motion, we go into executive session, discuss the potential sale of properties in that body.
Receive legal advice.
Receive legal advice.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor? Aye. We're back from executive session, no actions were taken during the executive session.
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Good job, Brian.